Today I am in Houston, Texas, talking with Riva Laughlin, who is the librarian at the law firm of Hayes and Boone LLP here in Houston. Riva, it's a pleasure to see you this today.
Good to see you today.
Ask you a little bit about yourself as an individual. Could you begin by telling us a bit about your life, perhaps now, and also perhaps when you were younger?
Well, I was born in Raleigh, North Carolina. I was raised all up and down the East Coast. My dad worked for W.T. Grants, and so we moved about every 2 years. I had lived in 11 different houses by the time I was 13. Mm-hmm. So it means that I have a pretty eclectic view of the nation, if you will.
And you're not a military
And
person.
I'm not in the military, no. Daddy did get into the Army and Air Force Exchange Service. He saw that Grants was going downhill, and so he got in with the Army and Air Force Exchange. Ended up in Killeen. I went to college for 2 years at Southwestern University in Georgetown, which is where I met my husband. We got married, we moved to Houston. He was one of those very rare things, a native Houstonian. Born and raised in Houston,
aren't
loved
many
it.
of them around.
There are not many, and he was one and wanted to get back here, so after we got married, we came back to Houston. I finished up getting my BA at University of Houston, and then went, okay, now what do I do? Because I got my BA in history. I was originally going to teach. I substituted for a year and discovered that no, teaching was not my calling, at least not of school children. So I started trying to go, okay, now what do I do? And my husband, bless his heart, he said, what did you want to do? I said, well, I've always wanted to be a librarian. My grandmother was a librarian. And I thought that was kind of a neat thing. So I said, okay, fine. He said, fine, figure out how to do it. I said, okay. Sam Houston State University up in Huntsville had a program at that time where you would go on Friday nights and Saturdays, 3 hours on Friday night, all day on Saturday, per class, and get your MLS.
It's a pretty good arrangement if you're trying to work or live
Yes, exactly.
nearby, like here in Houston.
They originally set it up that way because the program started about the same time as the state of Texas started requiring that librarians in schools had to be full-fledged librarians, had degreed librarians.
Degrees, yeah.
Yes. Up until then, they only needed like 24 hours of advanced schooling, but now they needed to get the actual degree. Of course, they were all teaching. So Sam Houston came up with this program where you came up on a Friday night and a Saturday for each class you were taking. And I did that for 3 years and got my master's and went from there.
But it seemed when you started it like it was going to be a long time in coming together.
Well, it took a while, but it was fun. It was interesting. I drove up on Friday, spent the night at the campus, and came back.
So you decided to go to library school. Now, how was it that you sort of decided to become a law librarian as opposed to a traditional regular one?
Well, as I was coming through the classes, I discovered that administration was not my strong suit, which sort of knocked out public libraries. And as we've already said, I didn't enjoy teaching. And to be a school librarian, you not only needed the master's, you had to have 3 years. You had to have an education certificate and 3 years in the classroom. So I knew it was going to have to be a special library. I just wasn't sure which kind of special library at that point. When I started going to library school, I also got a job with the Texas Medical Center Medical Library.
Okay.
As an acquisitions assistant, and worked there while I was going through school. Bob Downey from over at Baker & Mott's came into the library one day. He was getting a library card so that he could borrow medical things for Baker Botts. And happened to mention to the circulation desk that he was looking for a cataloger. Just in conversation, it came up, he's looking for a cataloger. They let me know. I was looking for an internship at that point, and Sam Houston didn't have many corporations for the special library part, so it was kind of like, you need to try to figure out your own internship. So
This one sounds like it paid too.
I got in touch with Bob Downey and I said, look, I need an internship. and you need a cataloger. And you don't have to pay me. I pay the school for the privilege of coming to work for you.
An offering had not heard before.
So he and I just kept bugging him. You know, I'd call him, and he'd say, "Well, no, we haven't made a decision yet." And I'd wait a week, and I'd call him again.
You're a freebie. What decision?
Well, it ended up not being a freebie because workers' comp wouldn't let it happen. And you know, being lawyers, they wanted to cover themselves.
Well, you didn't have to tell them that too early.
So I did my internship there as cataloger, and after I got through with the internship, I was there for about, I don't know, maybe 3 months. Bob sort of said, "Well, we've trained you in the Baker Bottsian way, so hey, would you like to work with us?" Sounded good to me, so that's
In
how
other
I got
words, you
started.
wouldn't go in there and revolutionize the place at his expense.
Exactly. So that's kind of how it happened. I ended up as a law librarian, and I've been doing it for, let me see, 1983. So we're looking at almost 33 years
A
now.
few years,
Yeah.
yes.
Quite a while. So.
Well, it's a nice way to earn a living, in my opinion. It was
I
today,
agree.
and, yeah.
I definitely agree.
Now, I know that there got to be a few hours in the day or a week or whatever when you're no longer commuting to Huntsville, unless it's to go up and see somebody that's incarcerated, because that's state penitentiary.
Yes, that's
And
true.
I'm sure that is the case.
I don't know anyone up there. No.
Don't know anyone currently living in that place.
No.
So maybe you have other hobbies or passions or special interests. Can you
I-
tell us about any of those?
I do have a few. I'm very active in my church.
Okay.
I sing in the choir at church. Music is a big part of my life. So I sing in the choir at church. I am not currently involved with the Houston Symphony Orchestra chorus, but I did sing with them for about 4 years when I was younger. My husband sang with them for 10 years. I play dulcimer, mountain dulcimer, Appalachian dulcimer. I'm throwing in a lot of words because some people don't know what one is. I've done that for probably 15 years now. There is actually a group here in Houston that is acoustic music leaning towards folk with the dulcimer as the main focus. And I've been out of action with them for a couple of years, and I'm trying to get back in with them. I have a Jack Russell Terrier that demands a lot of time when I'm home. And probably an occupational hazard of any librarian, I read a lot. Cozy mysteries especially.
Well, it sounds like you can keep yourself fairly busy out of the office, such as it is. But in the private sector, I've been told that your work doesn't exactly stop at 5 o'clock usually.
No, sir. There's times when it doesn't. In fact, for Haynes and Boone, we cover the email from 7 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night. And there are only 3 of us on staff, so that means that we have to rotate through working the late shift. So every third week, I work until 7 o'clock at night. So it's.
I have a daughter who works in the real world for actually an insurance company. She's a lawyer by training, but she handles complaints from the various state agencies that deal with them and the responses back. And she tends to watch email pretty carefully, and she was out visiting us on the West Coast, and her office is in the Eastern time zone, so she had to kind of adjust her hours a little bit on watching those emails because of the time change.
Well, one of the reasons we cover until 7 is because we do have offices in California, and so that way we're covering them during the business day as well.
So you started off in library school, then ended up with Baker and Botts, was it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was one of the early law firms that I remember hearing a lot about my time here in Houston. They actually had a pretty sophisticated library early on compared to many of the other firms.
Yes.
Some of the energy firms had, the energy companies had big libraries, but the private sector law librarians were still, few and far between those days.
Yeah, Baker Botts, when I started there, we had a big staff already. The firm was on, if I remember correctly, we were on 9 floors, and there was a library on almost every floor. for instance, the library that I spent most of my time in was on the 35th floor with the litigators, so it was the litigation library.
Yeah.
We had a tax library on our tax floor, and so on and so on and so
Yeah,
forth.
I used to see that model in a lot of firms that run,
Mm-hmm.
they'd have a small, relative small compared to their whole thing, focused library for the people right in that area.
Right,
Who were
right.
physically near it.
Yeah, and we actually had degreed librarians in some of these, not in all of them, but in some of the outlying, if you want to call it that, or practice area libraries. So that was kind of cool. We had Ubix all over the place.
Oh, I remember those.
Yeah,
The little
attorneys-
tiny keys.
The little with the little chiclet keys, yes.
Yes.
We were. My understanding is that Baker Botts was one of the few firms where they actually had Ubix in attorneys' offices,
Uh-huh.
and that was interesting trying to keep up with.
Mm.
We got in with Westlaw relatively early, from what I understand. Baker Botts was one of the first firms to go to a computerized telephone, and they ended up having something called the IBM Rolm phones, ROLM.
Yeah,
And
I'm not
when-
familiar with that.
When those phones went on the attorney's desk, they had access to Lexis and Westlaw right there on their desktop.
Wow, that must have been like dying and moving right to
It
heaven.
must have been to them, but it was real interesting
Probably
trying
for
to
the
get set up. and it
Company
was-
too, and
yes.
billing.
Yeah, it was interesting trying to get it set up. It was interesting. I got to be one of the people that they called when they had problems, just simply because I was one of the ones that was there when the system was put in, so I sort of knew what was
We as
happening.
librarians are supposed to solve problems. for these
Exactly,
things. Oh, we don't
exactly.
need you, we can Google it. Well, lots of luck.
Yeah.
And get what you really want.
Yeah, it's like, oh, library, Lexis, that has to be a library problem. I don't care if it's the fact that my Ubik doesn't turn on. It must be a library problem. So,
Probably learned a lot about the technical things too.
yes, sir, we did.
Well, you were with Baker and Botts for a number of years, and then in 1988 you moved to Brown, Parker, and Lay.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about what tempted you to jump ship from the first one and
Well,
so on?
It was an opportunity for me to see how I would do a little higher up the ladder, if you will. Brown, Parker, and Leahy, at the time that I joined them, they were still called Baker, Brown, Sharman, and Parker. And they had just merged with Reynolds, Allen, and Cook. And the Reynolds, Allen, Cook folks were used to having a librarian.
Okay.
Baker, Brown, Sharman did not have a librarian. And so they put the call out, because I think the Reynolds, Allen, Cook people said, well, we aren't going to move if we don't have a librarian. So they put the call out for a full-time professional librarian for the firm. And I thought, well, hey, I might see what's going on over here. There wasn't a whole lot of places to go with Baker Botts because Bob Downey was the head librarian. He was doing an absolutely fantastic job, and there was nobody going to get him out of that job,
He
and nobody
wasn't
wanted
leaving.
to. Nobody wanted him to leave. Nobody wanted to get to try to get him out of there. So it's like, if I'm going to do anything, I need to move on.
Well, having been one time in the director's role, it's delightful to have people working with you who have that kind of ambition and ability while you have them.
Well, and one of the things that I found out and served me well, I guess, is that was my way of actually finding out that administration was not my long suit. I mean, I did okay. I did. The library was still there when I left Brown, Parker, and Leahy. But I did find that it wasn't my strong suit, and so that my talents lie elsewhere, and that's what I needed to keep going with.
Sure.
So that's why I went to Haynes and Boone, because they had gotten to the point where they needed a librarian in the Houston office. The Houston office had grown to the point where they needed a librarian. And I thought that was kind of the best of both worlds. I would be in Houston on my own, but I wouldn't have to make the big administrative decisions. That was handled out of our home office in Dallas. So,
Well, that's good. I mean, administration is, everyone says, well, that's the job everyone thinks they want until you try and do it. And there are aspects to it that are different.
That's
from
right.
Other jobs.
That's right.
It's not everybody's forte.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can understand that, having done it, and there are days when you wish somebody else could take care of something.
Exactly.
It's something you couldn't delegate, and so you're it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember years ago when I was here in Houston, so we're looking back close to 50 years,
Mhm.
there was an attorney, a famous trial attorney named Richard Racehorse Haynes. Is that the Haynes that is the name? Or
No, it is
were
not.
there more than one of them?
There was more than one Haynes, and the really funny thing is, the Haynes of Haynes and Boone was also Richard Haynes.
Okay.
He went by Dick.
Not Racehorse.
Not Racehorse, no. Excuse me. The one thing that he always did, first of all, Haynes and Boone's home office is in Dallas. The firm started in Dallas and then moved to Houston, whereas I believe Racehorse Haynes was always here in Houston.
Yeah.
But when they moved into town, they always had to, when it first came out, Haynes and Boone, oh, Richard Racehorse. No, not that Haynes. And Dick Haynes in Dallas took to calling himself Plowhorse to kind of distinguish the difference. You know?
Racehorse and Plowhorse.
Yes,
I
he used
see.
to call himself Plowhorse Haynes so that you wouldn't mix them up. So, but yeah, the Houston office opened in 1990. The firm started earlier than that in Dallas.
Yeah, a lot of the firms in Texas seem to be either Dallas or Houston based, and then they'd open an office in the other city. And I suppose now Austin's got to be in the mix too.
Austin seems to be in the mix. I know they are for us. We have an Austin office,
Yeah.
so you know, and I'm sure a lot of the other firms do as well.
Well, even though Texas always prides itself on being big and all of that, they really are. And there's a lot that goes on in this state. More so, I mean, I live in a state capital that is a delightful city, but I wouldn't call it the most, shall we say, vibrant of cities. It's a laid-back suburb about 50 miles south of the real city of the state. But,
Well,
Austin, on the other hand, is quite a place.
Yes, sir, it is. It's and I mean, you know, when the unofficial city motto is "Keep Austin Weird," you know, there's kind of an odd thing going on there, but.
Yeah, well, it's one of the places that one really hears a lot about. Of course, so is Houston. I mean, Houston is what, the fourth largest city in the country now.
I believe so, yes, sir.
Yeah, we were like fifth when I was here, and then Detroit was vying with us for that rank. And of course, unfortunately for Detroit, they are also ran now.
At this point, yes, sir.
Yeah. Oh well, be that as it may. Tell us a little bit about some of the things you've done with the firms. You've had a couple, several of them now, and you don't do administration. Talk about some of the work you do, some of the things you've accomplished.
Well, probably if we go back to the beginning, probably with Baker Botts, the biggest thing was getting the Rome funds in. That was actually something that ended up on my plate. And I helped get everybody ready.
Good to be a librarian who knows something about everything.
Well,
at least that's what they assume.
And
you didn't want to.
I wasn't going to wasn't going to disappoint anybody, but that was kind of cool because that sort of got me into using the computers in libraries and finding out exactly, because part of what I had to do was explain to the lawyer, okay, it's on your desk now. This is what you use it for. So that was kind of a good thing to get started with there, and it's been something that I've tried to keep up, but I've also discovered that as I get older and as computers become more pervasive, there's an awful lot that I don't know. And I'm not sure I can learn at this point. So I keep trying. Right now I'm working on at least rudimentary HTML. We're trying, Haynes and Boone has a in-house portal, and we have a lot of library documents on that portal so that when folks need them, they can find them easily. And we're working at trying to present them as HTML now as opposed to PDF, because that makes them a little bit more interactive and a little better for us, easier for us to update and that sort of thing. So I'm trying to learn HTML, which keeps me young.
PDF is easy, it does it all for you.
Exactly.
But then it doesn't do anything more.
That's right. So that's sort of by accident, I'm at least 1 foot in the computer resources library camp. And I think it does help keep life interesting, because that's the part that's really changing.
Yeah.
Although I do still have an affinity for the books, there is still something interesting about having all
You
the
even
books
have a
laid
few of
out.
them in the firm still?
We do still have
Good.
books in the firm.
And they're not in the front room for the clients to be impressed?
No, I actually still have a library. I still have a somewhat functioning library. I don't see very many people in the library very often,
Well, you
but I
gave
do.
them all those fancy things for their desktop so they can find their stuff right there and not have to come bother you for that.
I do get calls every once in a while for, do we have a book on blah blah, and then I'll have to go take a book in. Talking about the pretty books in the front area for the clients, though, when Haynes and Boone moved their offices from the Wells Fargo building to One Houston Center, we moved over Memorial Day weekend. And we had to come in and work on Memorial Day because we wanted to hit the ground running and be open for business on June 1st.
Yeah, I can understand that.
But they kept calling us because they said, we've got a few last minute things we got to finish up. We will call you when we want you to come to the office. And so they first called about 8 o'clock in the morning and went, not quite yet, try about 10. And then they called 10 and go, no, we're still not quite ready, so how about, and so on. It got to be about 3 o'clock in the afternoon before we actually got to the office. We had a moving firm take the books over, gotten all the shelves labeled and everything. The moving firm put the books on the shelves. When I was arranging the books on the shelves, I didn't think anything much about where exactly they were falling, except that they came in catalog number order.
Yeah.
And it just so happened to turn out that the CFRs and the Federal Registers and that sort of thing ended up on the shelves that were right off the elevator lobby as you walked into the firm.
Oh.
When I got to the office at 3 o'clock that afternoon, I had a note from our managing partner who said that he wanted the pretty books on the shelves.
Impressing the clients again.
Yes, and I couldn't get mad at him because his very next sentence on the note was, call me when you get here, I'll help you move them.
Well, an offer you didn't want to refuse.
I figured, well, okay, if the managing partner's willing to help me move, yes, we'll go ahead and do this. Yeah. I did call him, however, and tell him it's going to take a whole lot more than just you and I to move these. We're really going to have to bring the moving company back in because I have to have some place to put them so that I can shift.
Yeah.
I said, I can't do it today, but I can have them fixed by the end of the week. Will that work? And he said, yes, that will work just fine. But I still get a kick out of the fact that we had to have the pretty books, and my managing partner was willing to help to make it happen.
I remember earlier today at lunch, I spoke to the Houston group, and I mentioned that my days of my father being a lawyer, they had a room full of books, but it was mostly to show clients that they were real lawyers.
Yeah.
They had some real law books.
That's sort of what this was, I think. But
yeah.
No, I really do understand why, because let's face it, the CFRs, they won't stand up. They don't take up enough room on the shelf. They really don't look very appealing. That's and right. The library was right off the elevator lobby. It was the first thing anybody saw on that floor. Yeah. So I can understand the concern.
In a way, they're probably some of the most important books in the whole place.
Very true, very true.
What they contain, and you better darn well, if your lawyers know about that stuff.
Very true, but what can I say? They're just not pretty.
Yeah, well, that I agree. Yeah, governments, publications, and we shouldn't complain because they could make them pretty, but we just have to pay more for them.
That's also true.
Yeah. Very good. Well, you were active also in the profession in a more broad sense over the years, in addition to your day job. I remember years ago in the DC chapter, walked to the Metro with a group of colleagues, and one of the people walking with us was the president of the DC chapter at the time, and we walked past a building where his office was, and he said, well, I have to go up and take care of a few things. This was 9:30 at night. And I thought, oh, I'm glad I don't work for the real world. I was an academic. I was headed for the Metro to go home.
Yeah.
But you somehow found time to be active in ALL and SLA, and certainly in the Houston Association of Law Librarians.
Yeah, I've
The
sort of.
president of that crowd, and gotten their award as Volunteer of the Year.
Well, I think president of that crowd simply came because it was my turn.
Well, that may be true.
At that particular point, it was like
things.
okay, we've already done all these people. Now it's your turn.
Yeah.
So,
You make it sound like my neighborhood association. We have 35 homes, and a lot of the people are very busy in their professions.
mhm.
Or if they're not, they're retired and they go off for months in the winter to Arizona or someplace. And
Mhm.
so the opportunities to serve on the board of directors, which we have to have because we own some property in the,
Right,
and so
right.
on, and we're responsible for it,
Right.
falls on those of us that are left. And so I've been on that board a few times.
Seriously though, I did when I became a librarian in Houston. I did go ahead and join the local chapter. Actually, joined local and national both.
Mm-hmm.
But I did attend locally with the intention of getting involved, and I started with committees and worked my way through. I sort of felt like it was something I needed to do. I thought it was another way to advance my career, for me to learn what was going on. When I first started, it was simply, oh, look, there's other people who do this job. They can help me. So that was the main reason with getting involved. I've done a little bit at the national level, not as much as I maybe would have liked to, but it just didn't quite work out. Which, that's fine. That happens.
The National, for a long time, in my early days at least, it was quite an undertaking to get involved because we
Mhm.
didn't have the staff at headquarters. We had one person for
Right,
a long time,
right.
Annette Russo,
Mm-hmm.
who was very good, but she could only do so much. So the volunteers or the people that were in offices and so on worked very hard.
Mhm.
It's a little less that now because the staff takes some of the burden off. Same thing when you host the annual meeting.
Right.
It used to be the locals that did virtually all the work. Now they advise because they know the hometown better than the people from Chicago
Mhm,
headquarters.
mhm.
But it's a different world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I can understand when you say.
Yeah, I've done it. I helped out a little bit with SLA was the Texas chapter. Their meeting
Mhm.
was here in town, and I basically just helped with local arrangements on that.
Yeah.
And I've done a couple of small meetings for local arrangements and that sort of thing, just because it's kind of fun to get in that way. I
Well,
enjoy
the
that.
Southwestern chapter is a very different kind of meeting than you would have here with Hall.
Mhm. Yes.
I mean, it's more the tradition. People travel to places and they sort of have some fun at the same time. It's a little bit of a vacation from work for a day or so.
Well, one of the things that when I was chapter president and secretary and in the on the board and that sort of thing, we would get questions from other, like when I went to the council chapter presidents that year, for instance,
Mhm.
I got questions from almost everybody in the room. How do you do it? And I kind of went, how do we do what? We're one of the few, Hall is one of the few associations that has a monthly meeting.
Mhm.
A lot of them don't have, but maybe once a quarter or something like that.
Yeah.
We meet every month from August through May. We only take the summer off.
Mhm.
And we have substantive programs every month from August through May.
Yeah. Maybe today was the exception since I
No,
was your speaker.
sir. No, sir. No, sir. It was also. It was
I
a
hope you
very,
all enjoyed it. I enjoyed
It was
doing
enjoyable and informative, and we were very, very happy that you were here with us. But we've always been able to find either locally or nationally, we've been able to find people who are willing to come and talk.
Yeah.
We don't usually pay anybody, so it isn't a matter of having money to be able to hire somebody to come speak to us.
We're all used to the pro bono aspects of our
Exactly.
professional service.
But we have just always been able to pull together a pretty good program every month.
Yeah. Well, if you meet 9, 10 times a year or whatever, 8, 9 times, that's a pretty ambitious undertaking for the hall.
Up until just recently, we always also had a pretty substantive newsletter monthly. We've just recently gone to quarterly, which is great because that gives everybody a little bit more time to get things together. But there for a while back in the 80s, we were doing a monthly newsletter as well, except through the summer. Every month that we had a meeting, we also had a newsletter.
Several of the chapters were doing, in some ways, extremely good, well-done newsletters. You were one of them, there were a few others.
Right.
That was part of, I think, what helped prod AELL into looking at its own newsletter and hiring a professional in Chicago to make it more appealing in a sort of a graphics, visual sense, as well as substantive sense. And it took a while, but it happened.
Yeah, I think the New Spectrum's doing pretty good. I'm getting a kick out of it.
Yeah, I enjoy reading it. Again, well, I always read the newsletter of the Spectrum when it became that, but because it wasn't that long, and I found it kind of interesting. I didn't always read every article, but I could peruse it and then read the ones that were interesting. But now, as a retiree, I have more time, so I can read some of the longer articles in the Law Library Journal. And I have found some of those really fascinating to read.
Yes, sir, I imagine, yeah.
Indeed, some of the people with whom I've had these conversations on camera for this project are some of the newer colleagues. That's how that all came about. They wrote something in there that was really, I thought, very interesting and forward-thinking, and I wanted to capture some of that for our project.
That's a great idea.
And my colleagues who have to concur, and whoever we're inviting to be included, did in those cases. And so
that's great.
Good.
That's a cool idea.
Well, you've done a lot, Riva, over the years, and we're now sort of nearing the end of being able to talk a little bit about it, the end of today's conversation. But is there anything that we have not discussed that you would like to talk about before we wrap it up?
I think you've done a pretty good job of pulling all sorts of really strange information out of me.
I have lots of sources. Some of them I'll brag about, like the old directories on members and so on, the biographical ones actually.
Yeah.
Others are a lot of colleagues I know who know people.
But no, I think we've covered everything that I can think of at least.
Oh, that's great. Well, I certainly have enjoyed talking with you this afternoon, and I want to thank you not only on my behalf, because I get the fun of coming here and seeing you and a few of our other colleagues here in Houston on this trip, but also on behalf of Michelle Wu and Frank Hodak, and of course Dick Spinelli, with whom I have the pleasure and honor of being able to put together this oral history of law librarianship for the Hein Online Spinelli's Law Library Reference Shelf.
It's a neat program. I'm really glad y'all, I'm not sure about this particular entry, but I'm really glad that y'all are doing that.
Well, we have a dog or two in the group. A guy named Keel was interviewed by Michelle a while back. I'm sure that one's on everyone's bad list, but the others are all good.
There we go.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay.